Hello, beautiful soul family. Rebecca here, your Vibe mentor. So excited to bring to you another beautiful soul sister, another story of a beautiful, amazing, heart-centered being who has stepped out of the unhealed wounds and into her life purpose. I'm excited to introduce to you Deanne. She is a trauma therapist and a shamanic healer. Deanne was overwhelmed as an energy sensitive child who grew up in an abusive home. And like many of us, she had to learn to use that sensitivity to navigate her own healing and to help others do the same. After decades of seeking, Deanne synthesized her path to emotional regulation and clearing limiting thinking so that she could manifest her soul's purpose and step into a process that she calls Embodied Awakening. She uses a combination of trauma therapy, relationship coaching, and spiritual coaching. I'm so excited to offer to you her bonus gift at the end of the session. She will walk us through an energy healing and cleansing journey. Make sure you stick around to the end where we offer you some beautiful gifts. I love you so much, my beautiful soul family. Remember, the whole intention of these series is to remind you, you are not alone. We all have had difficult challenges that can be overcome. You too can step into your purpose, and here is the path to doing so. I would say this will likely especially resonate with those of you who are highly sensitive, highly empathic, and identify as a seeker, who may also have struggled with perfectionism and hypervigilance and overgiving and people pleasing. Many of which the things I could also relate to. So I love you. Stick around. I'm so happy to introduce you to our beautiful soul sister, Deanne. Welcome, Deanne. Thank you for sharing your time and energy with us today. The community is so excited to meet you. Tell us more about yourself. What do you do, and how did you grow up? What was your life like as a child?
Well, thank you. I mean, anytime I get to talk about finding spirit and freedom instead of that early time, I'm excited to do that. I think like many people, at least 50% of our population, I grew up in a home that was highly suppressed. And I think of Mommy Dearest or Ordinary People, if you're old enough to know those movies. Just, there was a way to be or else. And boy, we had a nice presentation to the outside world. But really, I was a terrified kid. And so not connected inward, no inner guidance. No fantasy land, just getting lost in felt sense, which I love to do now because that's when my intuition is the strongest. Not really feeling created or connected to who am I and what do I want, just not having any of that because the vigilance, the having the radar out there, what is it I need to be or do or say, what's the mood out there. And so, not even knowing what I was missing from just survival.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how so many of us have such similar childhoods and we don't realize it, that we chose that difficult path to help us ascend or grow. And yet we feel like we're alone in that. And so I appreciate you
Absolutely.
sharing a little bit of that story with us. I know sometimes the details aren't always necessary.
Yeah. I think that having that perception that everybody else has it together helps develop that I must be perfect or that white picket fence presentation, which only reinforces, oh, I'm
Exactly.
alone in this and nobody else would get it, or something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
I'm less than somehow.
Yeah. And we don't realize that that's actually the trauma response, is having to do it right, fear of failure, walking on eggshells, just don't disrupt anything, right? So don't rock the boat, and how that creates our sensitivity and our ability to put those spiritual antenna out there and figure out what's going on. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
I wouldn't trade the sensitivity that I developed because while early on it was vigilance and then, going through a period of I would say maybe hypersensitive or, I can't go to the mall or I can't be around a crowd of people because I'm picking up everybody's stuff to
mm,
then finally learning how to manage energy. And so, not that I can just flip a switch, but I can just be more intentional. And so I wouldn't trade the sensitivity and the gifts that come with it. But yeah, early on, just totally feeling like my circuits are fried.
yeah, yeah, I felt that way too. So I can relate, and I know a lot of people in our community can, because it feels a little bit like a curse to be so sensitive before you
Yeah,
understand what it is and how to work with the body to be able to, one, desensitize some of the triggers, and
yeah,
two, be able to hold the energy when it is necessary. So How
Yeah.
long did it take for you to discover that?
Decades.
Yeah.
And
Decades.
that's part of why I'm out here, right? Is I feel like hopefully we can all learn from each other, and that path gets shorter and shorter for everyone. And I think I grew up before the internet, so it's not like we shared these things either.
Yeah.
But in my 20s, I spent that time. I had a union job. I worked for the school district. I felt like I was on mission. I was there to save the children. It was very rewarding work, and yet it was in a structure, in a system that had a lot of limitations too. And so it kind of helped me perpetuate my early childhood of things have to be a certain way, and you have to make sure everybody likes you. And this facade that I had created worked really well there until in my late 20s when my mother died. And I remember sitting in a parking lot, and I was journaling about all the things she was doing wrong with her life, or how she died at 53, which actually I turned this year. So it's this weird feeling
Mm.
that, wow, this is young, to be done. I feel like I'm just getting started and more free.
Mm.
But I remember sitting in that parking lot realizing I'm doing the same thing she was doing. Like, she spent her lifetime trying to please everybody else and get attention and be enough, and therefore was pretty empty and desperate. And that led to all sorts of behaviors, including addictions, which thankfully I didn't have to deal with, but just in my own way of obsessed about everything outside. And that was a real aha moment for me. At the same time as thinking I had all this security and had it all figured out because of the union job. And by then I had bought a house on my own, and thinking I was living a very different life than my family of origin.
Yeah, it's amazing. Generational trauma is a very real thing, even at a cellular level, how we can do it differently and yet still be doing it the same.
Yeah.
And the process of deconditioning, right? And I think you mentioned sort of your breakdown moment or your breakthrough moment was when your mother left. Tell me more about what did that look like when you started to have that aha moment?
It evolved over time. I was in therapy, so I used those, cognitive behavioral tools, or, I feel like by the end of my 20s, I had this encyclopedia of, okay, here's how to live, corrective parenting and boundaries, what it's supposed to look like and sound like. And hey, that's better than nothing, and had its place. But I didn't realize I wasn't even embodied. And so the universe provided another opportunity, because shortly after I married a narcissist. And so again, my life was absorbed in the outside. But in this interim, before I had met him, I was out camping, and my grandmother died during that time. And I used to, because I had summers off, I would go to the campgrounds from Monday through Thursday, and I would have the whole place to myself. And it was great. Like, it was my way of trying to feel safe in the world, and trying to listen inside. And she came to me and she told me she was free and she was dancing, and that was another pivotal, like, moving away from the early conditioning, because we were raised Catholic, and my grandmother had said, keep an aspirin between your knees. And I didn't really understand what that meant back then, but, just lots of shame and little guidance, but don't be bad, because, so after church, what did you kids learn? See, you're not supposed to be doing that, and, be a good little kid. But know, how do we do it? What do we do with our emotions, and how do we solve problems otherwise, or how do we get to speak up for ourselves, and get empowered, or have critical thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an important point too. One, we don't have it taught to us or modeled in any way when we have complex trauma or difficult childhoods, or especially if you have two parents who are, or in their own trauma and unhealed. And so while the cognitive understanding can be helpful, it's still not embodied, to your point. What does it
Yeah.
feel like? What does it feel like in my nervous system to be safe with
Right.
another person?
Yeah.
Right. And I love that you also tie in not just the schooling, the education system, the children, and all the trauma that comes with that, but then also the religious experience and in healing, all of the, so many common experiences that people in the spiritual community have that we don't realize is that difficult childhood, religious trauma, narcissistic relationships, and they all go hand in hand. And I can very much personally relate. I like to use the phrase keywords. We all kind of have our own keywords that kind of pluck an emotional cord as if it was a URL address to our trigger, right? And for me, it was being bad because of that religious trauma, right? And I had a narcissistic pastor for a father who loved to wag his finger and say, "You're a sinner and you're shameful." And
Yes.
just the shake that happens in your system if you dare do anything even close to remotely wrong or to upset someone. And so what was your a little more information around your experience with the religious piece and healing that religious trauma?
I at that transition time started to really seek like how do I get more connected? And being out in the woods was, my church in a sense. But then I married a sun dancer, and I began to follow that path and sweat lodge, and again, lots of huge gifts in that. But the surface level piece of thinking that we completed our dance and we both had rights to pour sweat lodge, and thinking like, okay, now I'm doing it the right way. At the same time, learning vibrational medicine and Reiki and restorative touch. So a lot of energy work type things, and working with the universe, the elements, the minerals, really seeking where am I going to feel at home, or where do I belong, or how do I get that feeling of somebody's got my back. And again, in hindsight, it wasn't because I was looking outward. It didn't get me that comfort I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got divorced, I had left that community more to be away from him. But as I went back to the woods, I realized, oh, like being on my own is when I start to get the inner guidance. And so that's when I would listen, or I would hear things. For example, one day I was down at the mountain and I was praying about something, and my life was going really well. And I remember the creek had said, why are you always trying to swim upstream? Like really sassy to me. And because I was overthinking, I was trying to plan everything and make sure I was doing it right still. But I had EMDR therapy and had been doing some ego state work by then. And so that old patterning was breaking loose, but there were still lingerings of it. And, in hindsight, speaking of ego state therapy, I realized I was a 6-year-old with my ex-husband, that I was intimidated by him, so I went right back into, oh, how do I please the narcissist? And if only I could do this. Maybe if I show him how hard I work. I had 3 jobs, and he was in school, and so maybe if he sees how hard I work, I leave the house at 7 and I get home at 10 p.m. Or maybe if I am super loving and kind and show how playful and loving and all about him I could be. Maybe if I get assertive and so still outside focused. And I don't regret the lessons I learned. I studied 8 different marriage programs. Even though 12 weeks into my marriage, I got that whole body feel, which I didn't know to recognize back then. But I got that whole body feel of just knowing, like, oh yeah, this isn't going to work. I spent 5 more years and studying 8 different marriage programs to try to fix it before I got so depleted energetically. I was doing all of the rituals, and I was doing the energy work and feeling like a failure at it, by the way, because I didn't feel peaceful and like I had more to give.
Yeah.
And so I finally got to the place of like, I really have nothing more to give, to the point that I was driving home, and there was a corner coming up, and I was so exhausted. And for a split second, I pictured my car going straight into that telephone pole. And one, I think that's a trauma response of, every once in a while I still get it. A couple years ago, I witnessed an event, and for a little while, it would be like imaginary car accidents or like things that weren't happening, but my mind would play these things out. And I'd have to say, nope, Deanne, that's not happening. You're safe now, present timing, soothing the nervous system again. So I think that was a trauma response, but it got my attention because I went, oh, I really don't have any more to give, because I felt relief. I thought, oh, then I can rest.
Yeah.
And that was another really huge pivotal moment of I very quickly began preparing myself to leave that relationship.
Yeah. Isn't that incredible? The extent that we would go to to make everything okay at a subconscious level would take us all the way to death.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating too when you look at the connection to hypervigilance, right? That, and I can relate. This is probably
Doesn't feel like a choice.
no, I have to extend every ounce of my very last bit of energy to try to make this okay, to the point that I would rather be the one to exit than to say I can't fix this. And
Yeah.
it's so subtle. And I can relate. I had a narcissistic relationship that I went back to more times than I ever should have. And I was trying new things, the new relationship program, or
Yeah.
manifesting the highest
There
version
must be
of them,
something.
or yeah, it's incredible. And to not beat on yourself for it is very difficult. And I wonder if you would agree. In my experience personally, of all the trauma responses that I've had to let go of, hypervigilance was the hardest. And in my experience with clients, it's also the most difficult to let go of. And I'd be curious your perspective on this. I suspect it might be because, or part of it is that the way of the world is the conditioning that we experience collectively, as a whole, as humanity, is to work and to try to fix and to outwardly do to make everything okay.
Yeah.
And the association with my value and worth being defined by what I do or accomplish or achieve. And
It's highly rewarded, right? People aren't going to
I,
say, especially in a relationship where it's very much benefiting somebody, they're not going to say, "Hey, let me be responsible for emotionally responsible or support you and engage and be there for you as well." It attracts more people who are happy to sit back and let you keep doing more.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the shaking that happens in you when you're not doing that can seem, I mean, the for me, the rattling of the system was difficult to sit in, but then you bring in the perspective of the world who says you should be trying to fix this. You should be working hard. You should be self-sacrificial, right? And so
Yeah.
going against both societal conditioning and the nervous system rattling, can seem like a lot to hold before being embodied and understanding how to work with the body to heal that.
And at the same time, when I thought the answer was in the spiritual world, it felt like bypassing because of doing all those rituals and even in that community hearing, just let it go, or just it's okay to be safe, or those things that just felt so easy to say, but that without the embodied. So I say embodied awakening because that's what I feel like I went through, is that there's one thing about being in the body. I did ecstatic dance and yoga, and every month I had goddess gatherings where lots of embodied feminine practices, and so I thought I was in the body, and yet when you're in the trauma response, it's not conscious, right? And so not realizing how disembodied I was, not realizing I was being a 6-year-old in my relationship. I justified it, and my rational mind was able to say, like, well, relationships take work, and so
Yeah. Love
you
is hard.
right, or you're failing. I At the time, I was doing primarily family therapy, and so I had gone through a phase of brain health and ADD and performance, and so everything I needed to learn, or everything that I felt like, oh, I'm good at this, so I should do it. I was trying to find my purpose, and they all, I mean, they were all hugely rewarding in certain ways, so it tricked me into thinking that's enough.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until now I feel more of that embodied awakening where it's just being alive.
Yeah.
Is that, like, when I go to work and I do 3 hour 3 or 6 hour EMDR trauma focus intensives, and I'm done with those, and I'm like, what a great day, like I'm
Yes.
not exhausted or anything.
Yeah.
And surprisingly my clients aren't either, most of the time, because it's a lot of repair. It's that connecting to the light and the love and the healing, as opposed to just reviewing the old, or what I found in early coaching or just early spirituality of just let that stuff go, just focus on the light, and or trust and hand it over. And I couldn't, because the God that I was supposed to hand it over, or source or creator, that was a judgy person, or then I was failing in some way, and so it wasn't safe.
Yeah. There's so many things that you say. I'm like, we could go in this direction and that direction. It's so beautiful. I think embodiment is probably where we should stick to, but it's again another common experience in the spiritual community to disassociate, to be disembodied, to deem this somehow curse of a meat suit, and to want to go home or to go out there, and forgetting to be grounded in the body in this space. And I love that you mentioned the intensive, because I did the brain spotting training, which is similar to EMDR.
Yeah, yep.
Those long days where, and I was doing it with someone who was teaching from Europe. So I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I felt more energized after that day. And to your point, because we're coming home to ourselves and we're getting that restorative experience that is energizing. And to your point, the looking away or just letting it go comes down the line, but the embodiment and the restorative experience needs to come first. So what do you experience when you help people kind of come back to themselves and finding that safety in themselves? And I guess I'll add to that, just because connection can be so difficult, right? Connecting to self then allows us to connect to others. So.
Right. And not having any clue of what is that supposed to look like.
Yeah.
When I started my spiritual journey a little over 20 years ago, I learned how to journey. So I was in a vibrational health program, and every month there was a different theme, emotional body, mental body, and doing the tools that went with that. But when it was, she called it dreaming body, but it was shamanic. I came alive. And it was actually that whole weekend. I had a cougar that kept like gnawing playfully at my neck. And I thought, I'm making all this up. Like, I had never intended that. I didn't know about that spirit world in that way, because I was raised Catholic. And, so it was very spontaneous, but that was the beginning. And so I learned how to journey. And for 2 years, every night I would journey. So I left my body and had amazing adventures and amazing healings. But then I had to come back into that meat suit. And, I think that word is so fitting when I think of a slab of meat, or, like just how heavy and dense and thick. It's not airy and flowy. And I experienced the same when I would go out to the woods Monday through Thursday, or, any chance I get, I still am out in the woods. But now I feel like I bring my whole self. But back then it was, now I can escape. Now I can be peaceful. And then I have to go back into the city and, and be around people. When I did a workshop years ago with Warrior Sage, the gentleman, Satyan Raja, names people. And he named me Crack Between Two Worlds. And that was so fitting. It felt like I was at the edge with my paraglider, but I couldn't jump. I was equipped and I wanted to, and I was standing there, and it was painful to just stand there, but I couldn't take off. And I think that was that missing embodiment. I was doing all these things. And again, I think that was a necessary step. I think now that I'm aware of it, when I work with my clients, it's more of a 3 to 6 month process instead of years. But going out there is what started to even give me the concept of feeling safe. So then I needed it, whether it was actual woods or the spirit world. Then the interactions started happening where, hey, I'm not at my best, or I'm cranky, or I didn't handle that well. I was being judgmental, and yet the spirits still come, whether that was an animal or a angelic type being, and, just the love that comes from that. And so over and over, having those experiences of not aligning with what my own judgment of myself, I am not worthy in some way, that I must somehow attain this Mother Teresa, or, almighty kind of place, then I would be worthy of receiving over there. And that's not at all what my experiences were. And so one that stands out is being able to, well, first it was a tree. I'll say it wasn't even a live being, right? Just being invited. I was walking up in Canada one time, and I walked by these 3 trees, and it was like these ladies just invited me to be their friend. And, I should be cautious about saying this on the internet for what some people think, but it was just this feeling of like camaraderie, and again, non-judgment, and come join us. And so eventually putting myself inside the tree started to soothe my nervous system. And, it took me till I was 30 to, in my 30s, to finally feel in my nervous system what it would feel like to be at rest and to be safe. And so then later adventures of with a bear family that I'm out in the woods and there's some bear cubs and I get to play with them and that they're safe and kind and I don't have to be a certain way and clearly I'm different than them, but that's okay. And that was one of my core wounds, was this fear of persecution, and that's why a narcissist could so easily manipulate me, or why I was there, usually till 8 o'clock, but one time till 2 a.m. in the school district, till I finally realized, like, oh, they're going to keep giving me work if I'm there, but just that, I'm not enough, so constantly giving myself. But there, with the cubs, I could just play. And then when Mama Bear came, at first, grown-ups, but having a very loving, protective feel from her as well, just really was so impactful. As a matter of fact, hopefully by next month, I'll be releasing a children's book, and that's part of the story, is like, I'm hoping that children get to know that way sooner than it took me to know that there's safety.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt that I'm in a neuroscience and trauma educational psychology program. So
Yeah.
when you talk about kids and the understanding, it boggles my mind how many children in our education system have trauma and are not aware, and also the teachers who are not aware. So it's being perpetuated for you as a teacher, and then also for the children, all without our awareness, accidentally. And I love to, and I was very hesitant when I started a YouTube channel, because I have an interest in psychology. And so to be respected in the industry, you don't talk about spirituality. And there's this, obvious hole or gap where there should be the mention of spirituality. And in my experience, one of the most healing factors is that connection to source and energy and all that is there to support us. And so I love to be able to go against the rules, I guess, and reference some of these things, because there is such an intimate connection between psychology and spirituality, that the hugging of a tree or being with the tree is co-regulation with a living being, and we need to co-regulate with other people and other individuals. And if we are suffering from complex trauma, it's a relational wound, people are scary, and so that can be very, very difficult. So to learn to co-regulate even with source, right, to co-regulate with a spirit animal, that is possible. And in again, it goes into that feeling in the body to understand what does entrainment feel like, what does safety feel like in a instead of just a cognitive state of being. So I love that you had that kind of experience, and I love your experience with Mama Bear as well. So just understanding that the spiritual community tends to justify isolation under the guise of healing. We get stuck in hermit mode, and we don't realize that the highest state of the nervous system is love and connection. And if our goal is ascension, which is oneness, we have to learn to be able to come back into community and togetherness, and obviously connection and co-regulation is going to be a piece of that. So how would you suggest people start to rephrase connection with others and address that fear of connection so that they can feel safe, even in a relationship with someone who's not spiritual or understanding of your inherent value and worth?
I think there's many layers to that. So I'll start with, similar to how that vigilance early on can cause people to be, ultra responsible, making sure they're doing enough, keeping score, and that just perpetuates the cycle, because then they attract themselves either to a workplace that will suck the life out of them, or relationships where people are takers. I think that when we are seeking that spiritual bypass, the I'm going to be saved, I'm going to be taken care of, it's still handing over, and it's not embodying that care. And so while all of those techniques have been a comfort, I put them more in the category of distress tolerance or soothe release. The thing I love about EMDR is the ability to bring in many modalities into one. And part of the early stage of preparing somebody is what does their nervous system need, and then how do they get stabilized enough that we can go in those closets and pull some stuff out and have it be freeing instead of overloading. And so I think we get to that stage of intending to stabilize, but we stop there. We just try to use the spiritual of crack between two worlds, right? I'm either in the trauma response of trying to be enough and go, go, go and perfection, or, over planning, overthinking, or up in la la land, and, being bathed in the light, but not really blending the two. And so on a clinical level, in my experience, it's been, we have to do the depth work, that it's not just understanding, why, or our family history. While that's a good place to start, it's not just going and hanging out with Mama Bear. It's not just having the past life experience and realizing, oh, I signed up for this. While that was hugely relieving as well. It's, but now what? Like, how do I call up those vulnerable parts one at a time and mentor them, love on them, parent them, show them the way? And maybe you can speak to this better than I can with what you're studying right now, but I think of it as, we know we need to activate both in the brain, meaning like my parent self, my highest self, needs to go to that 6-year-old, love on her, be with her, show her that there are other strategies, take responsibility for that, but while it's activated. And that's the mechanism behind brain spotting, or EMDR, right? Of making sure those two things are activated in the brain, so that this old way, this 6-year-old, has the opportunity to learn the new, and then she can grow and update to the point where we're not always managing a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Early clinical, or, actually, I say early, for the first 12 years of my therapy, I felt like I was recognizing, oh, I'm triggered. Okay, I need to manage this teenager, Deanne. Don't flip people off while you're driving. You need to be patient, or whatever,
Yeah.
go do some anger work to get that out. It was all this management, but it wasn't like, now there is no teenager, so turning toward that part, doing ego state therapy or whatever, loving kindness, inner child work, there's so many modalities out there, but caring for that one while also using the neuroscience. So stimulating that appropriately in the brain with the brain spotting or the EMDR, so that it has a chance to update neurons that fire together, wire together. So it's in that inner relationship of safety. So now the 6-year-old has a mentor self or a higher self, or sometimes, as you may know from your work, this higher self, there are no healthy ones. They're all like, I hate you, I want you gone, I want to annihilate you, you ruin my life, or you're inconvenient. So we might need to call in an imaginary grandma, or if they have a connection to source or God or grandmother moon, whatever it is, to have some loving connection. Then it becomes safe for the part of self that never knew safety. Then that part learns on a like minuscule moment by moment, like, oh, I get to be myself. Oh, I get to stand up. I get to have an opinion. I have a voice. It's even okay to feel. I don't have to suppress that and shut it down. And so then that starts to open and be more safe to be, which then increases self-esteem. And, because, oh, I'm worthwhile happens within. And so then it's like rinse, repeat. Then we start to know what kind of people to attract ourselves to. It's not the ones that are always judgy and we can't be ourselves, right? It's the ones that can say, oh, wow, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Or, oh, that's curious. Or I think we come at this differently, but there's an overall respect and appreciation of each other. Like, oh, then we know how to seek that in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like the coming home to self, or the wholeness, the healing that's happening within us strengthens us and allows us to then connect to others. Like the reconnection within self then
Absolutely.
becomes the ability to connect with others. And I think there's a really important, and we'll talk about parts. What's interesting is the YouTube video I just posted before this will reference parts. So if you want to know more about parts, go
We'll
there.
build on that. Yeah.
But it's really fascinating that the concern or the reason that we don't feel safe is because we fear we're not enough. Right. And so that we people please so that they will reflect to us, I'm okay. Right. You like me, therefore I will feel okay. Right. You validate me, therefore I'm enough. And it is that fear of not being enough at a very subtle subconscious level. We can say with our smart brain, I'm enough. I think I'm enough. But your parts, right? The parts within you, there is a part of you that fears it's not enough, or fears it's not okay, or that it needs to behave in a certain perfectionist way to be accepted or liked or safe. And so the at least in my experience, the reason I felt afraid to connect with others was this questioning of, am I okay? Are they going to like me? Are they going to hurt me because I'm not enough? And I remember when my therapist, he said to me, I said, I'm concerned that I will upset them or they won't like me. And he said, well, do you like them? And right, how
Yeah,
we project our consciousness into other people and we're living from their state of being and how they feel about me instead of how do I feel about me
yeah,
or how do I feel about them. And so um, I do believe, and you can add to this, that moving towards oneness collectively as humanity, it starts with healing ourselves
absolutely. Yeah.
and coming back home to self and finding safety in self.
You're so right in that being such the core issue of, I'm not enough or feeling worthless in some way. And I remember, so even as a therapist, doing 15 years of therapy, studying, different modalities, it took me about 10 years of being a therapist. And I have this 3-inch binder of certificates. I mean, I was, trying to be enough. So I was,
Yeah.
seeking, and I love it. I'm very passionate about it. Before I really understood dissociation and how there's so much more to it, and then began a whole nother learning. But I remember sitting in therapy probably about 12, 15 years in, saying, well, I know I'm enough. I'm just frustrated that they don't know, and trying to talk about the interpersonal dynamic. And he said to me, well, if you felt like enough, you wouldn't be engaging, right? Like you wouldn't be here trying to prove to this person
Yep.
and hooked by it. And so you're right, it's hard to catch, even as a therapist, maybe I should know or whatever, but or after all that time, but it is so unconscious that we play out those core wounds.
Yeah. And that's the gift of the parts and the trigger that you mentioned. Because I know for me, searching for blocks, right, as that seeker, and we can talk a little bit about being a seeker too, because I think you mentioned you can relate to that as well, but always looking for the answer. What's the block? What's the problem? Why am I not able to move forward? Why am I not able to move through life the way I want to? And that's the secret, is the parts and the triggers. And
Absolutely.
to your point, you can't find the part and you can't work with the part if they are not activated, right?
Yeah.
So how would you add to that?
That's what I love about the EMDR intensive. So it's not just so in traditional EMDR we bring to mind a problem that we have, a known problem, and so we talk about the problem, we bring it up enough, and then we work to clear it and desensitize it. In the early childhood clearing, it's all about very, very systematically so that it's not overwhelming to people. But I'll just say it in the parts language, bringing up this aspect of self, this young explorer or adventurer, or bringing up the innocent part that didn't know better, or the 3-year-old who is power struggling. And so bringing up these different aspects of self and providing a loving, nurturing environment for them so that it's restorative, right? So that then they learn those developmental stages get accomplished because they learn what it felt like at that state. And they get what they need. So, I have a right to make choices, or I'm not a bad kid because I'm pushing buttons. I'm trying to figure out how I take up space in the world. And so reprogramming at that level
Yeah.
attends to the kids. And whereas I wanted to save the children in the elementary school, the actual human beings, like now I feel like I'm saving the children with those inner parts so that they can grow up in that person. And then instead of that person being an 80% person going around in life,
Mhm.
which only reinforces we're incapable or something's wrong with us, right? If our energy is drained on parts, we're not fully present, then we just continue to perpetuate the, oh, I must be an airhead, or I must have to work harder, or prove myself because I'm not enough, instead of grow those parts up, feel whole in oneself, changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we didn't plan to talk about this, but manifestation comes in there, right? If all of my energy is being expended on managing the different parts, then I am a diffuse light bulb and my energy is going in a million different directions. And it's kind of like we talk about mind, body, soul alignment and moving towards one direction altogether. That requires the parts to be on board and everybody moving in the same direction. So manifestation, creating your life, stepping into your purpose. It's all about thriving and becoming the highest version of who you were made to be. And from that wholeness, you will have an overflowing cup that pours into others. And by
Exactly. It just
default,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
by the default, you make the world a better place. So I think that's what a lot of us are seeking, right? When we talk about being a seeker, we're looking for that information that's going to
Mhm.
teach us how to do that. So what was your experience of being a seeker?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back just a second with
Yeah.
that. It's the thinking mind. So, I talked about spiritual bypassing. Well, then thinking mind says, okay, I know the answer. I'll manage it in this other way. So I'll make you perfect, or I'll make you really good at the plan. And so when we go to manifest, I think on an unconscious level, we're also saying, okay, what I need to do is, so it's not coming from a whole part of self. It's still that trauma response, that old information. Say on an emotional level, it's, I'm supposed to be nice, or, I have to suppress, and that's the unconscious path. Well, on the mental level, it might be, I have to accomplish certain things, or if I'm good at this stuff, then that must be what my purpose is. And I did rounds of that in the various things I've specialized in and within my business, and it has felt very fruitful. And so it gave me the, kind of tricked my mind into saying, like, see, this is what you should be doing. But there wasn't that full embodied, like, where it feels easy now, or it just feels like being alive instead of doing.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think this doing that early childhood clearing, or the parts work, or, getting deeper within, along with, and I've worked with many people who are atheists, and then many people who can just connect to the spirit world very easily. And I really witness it. I've done these for about 10 years, and there really is a difference between the people who inner resource, they will take a little bit longer to get through all the clearing, and they still say, like, yeah, this has been really life changing. But it's the ones that get connected to spirit are the ones that I hear from 6 months, a year, 5 years, like my life is incredible, I never knew. Where I think that it just blows things alive, and they make huge changes that are no longer scary. It's not, well, now I know, yes, I'm supposed to leave this job, and, this is going to be tough. Or I know now I need to leave this marriage, and I do feel clear about it. So I'm going to do it. But the people who have that spiritual resourcing have the moment by moment. And I had to learn this too. So when I went through a divorce, my ex was working on his PhD in psychology. So he was renting an office space across the hall. And so we got to engage each other while I was at work trying to be present to clients. There'd be these little drive-bys and give me practice in get back in my body and what do I have control over, and get resourced regulation to then be present.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah. And there's
Okay.
another energy piece there, right? Like if I'm trying to manage all of these things, then I'm going to be depleted and
Yeah.
be able to withstand the difficulty of life, because life isn't always easy. And it is really, at the end of the day, everything's energy. It's always an energy conversation. And where is your energy going? Is it going to managing those unhealed parts and those open wounds and stress responses? Or have you recalled your energy so that you are resourced when you have to leave the job or leave the relationship? And again, just to reiterate that your purpose is thriving, and it takes energy to move through and sort of uproot the old programs or the old experiences that we put ourselves in, the old relationships or dynamics that we put ourselves in. And in order to be able to move into that most aligned life, it will require a lot of energy to feel through and to be able to test and taste the things that are maybe possibly aligned for you, but you won't know without being able to do that work of taking action and giving it a try and seeing how it goes, and then being willing to pivot. And so I'll get to a question here. I think,
Actually, can I say something to what
yeah,
you're
go
saying?
ahead.
And I
Yeah.
might be saying the same thing, but just a different way. By doing the emotional, the mental, the spiritual work, by growing up these kid selves inside and doing that work, you're right that we are so much more present. And to me, that's a higher vibration, is how I might say it. Or, like we're so much more finely tuned, and that's where we live. So then when something comes along, let's say a business deal, and I then lower my vibration while maybe I'm studying a contract or doing technology, or, but I can feel my energy go down. Then I can say, oh, that's actually not for me.
Yep.
It's when something comes along and I start to engage it, and it could mean that I'm spending every spare moment, whatever thing I'm on, if I get a download to another course I'm going to create,
Yeah.
but it's with joy, and there's an aliveness, and not just in my head, what I notice is it's all the way down the core that there's this piece in there of like, yeah, it just is. This is just what I need to do.
Yeah.
And so by living from that place, then I don't have to work at intuition. Intuition is just there. I can feel it. And when people come into my field, I don't have to be trying to sense like, okay, let me get my vibrational tune so I can sense them to make sure that they're a good person in my life. I just already feel the sensations that I don't need to know whether they're a bad person or not. I don't need to prove whatever that they're trying to manipulate, or they know it, they're doing it intentionally or they're not doing it intentionally. It's just, oh, I go to a lower vibration when I'm with this person. So let me get curious and see if there's, if I can identify a triggered part or something to do the work on. But other times it's just, yeah, they're not my people.
Right.
And I get to move on and be around the people. That's what's helped me find a tribe now of like people. It doesn't mean we always agree. Especially the last 5 years, there's been, tremendous things happening in the world where we've had lots of opportunity to talk about like when we come at something very differently, but it can be at this place of fascination because there's not this unconscious need of, you must think like me, otherwise you'll think I'm bad, and then I'm threatened, right? I'm going to be persecuted. It's, oh, you get to think different. I wonder what that is. I get to consider that opinion, but I also get to be safe in mine.
Yeah. And you get to say it's for me or not for me without you being a bad person or them being a bad person. And I love that you brought it back to the body too, because that is the gift of the body, is that ability to feel, is it aligned or is it not aligned? Am I moving up in vibration or down? And I think for me, in my experience, building the business has gone a little bit slower because I don't want to necessarily subscribe to the traditional online way of doing business, become a coach and raise your prices and have online courses and hustle and grind and post on social media. And yes, I do all those things, but in the background, I'm still feeling into this doesn't quite fit right. And that doesn't quite feel right. And so I think for the spiritual community, it's important to hear somebody be honest and say, that's not the only prescription. That's not the only way that you get to feel into what will work for you, but you have to be willing, you have to have the energy, right? To be seen, to show up, to risk rejection or judgment or whatever it might be, and take the action, because you won't be able to find it from your thinking brain. It is a felt sense. And so that does require taking some of that action. So what was it like for you to move from working for someone else in the education system and even in therapy, and to move into working for yourself?
From the union job of the, this is how we all think and what you must do, it was very freeing. I wanted more depth and not just to be, feeling like I was putting out fires all day. And so it was hugely rewarding. But in hindsight, I was continuing to perpetuate what I knew in terms of, do it this way. I took a marketing course and, lots of time, energy on those things, and they kept feeling flat to me. Or people who knew me really well would watch something and be like, I don't even recognize you. You talk completely different. Mm-hmm. And so they were lovingly calling me out on like, it's not my vibe, right? I was performing instead of just being on video. Mm-hmm. And that continues to be a journey, but I look at my videos now and it's like, oh, I totally recognize myself, or, oh, I flubbed there. That's not what I meant to say, but I was following the energy. So whatever. But I definitely have noticed that in my own business, where early on when I was trying to make it go right, it was, I can laugh at it now, but if somebody canceled and I'd be like, oh no, that's going to throw things off, right? Then 5 more people would cancel. It was like my vibe, right? Just like took a nosedive, and people would feel it. I wasn't really holding space for them. And so I have done the same kind of experimenting with whether it's a course or videos, and particularly early on when I felt like I had a lot of canned ones that were following some formula, or, in my marketing class, I was following the bullet points of what I was supposed to do. And that all has its place, but it threw off my energy, and that's what mattered, is then I was no longer being authentic. And I think people feel it, even though, somebody who didn't know me could be like, yeah, that's great content, it says everything it's supposed to say.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have the same impact. But when I felt like, and early on it was scary, it was like, oh, I'm being raw, I'm sharing something personal, or I'm saying it just in the way I want to instead of in the clinical way. And then those would be the ones that people would write back, send me an email like, wow, this really woke something up in me, or I felt so loved, or thank you for sharing this, it was the perfect timing. And so that's what I want to follow. And I am inconsistent. I probably put 2 newsletters out a month, but I won't do it unless I feel the energy of it, and something is coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no better way. It takes longer, I think, especially for those of us who grew up people pleasing and being disassociated and living for everyone else. It can take longer to find what's aligned for you. But in the end, there's so many entrepreneurs. I mean, they say 1% make it because they are not aligned. It's not feeding,
Yeah.
nourishing them. So
Yeah.
there kind of isn't any other way, if you ask me. So
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Which I think in some ways summarizes, everything we're saying is go within, take care of those parts, and be who you are in the world. Like if we had to shorten everything,
yeah.
right, is that it is about just loving on all the aspects of self, and that inherently will help them grow out of those habits that aren't serving. Something like perfection maybe takes longer to realize that it's not helpful because of how much accolades and how much everybody else loves it, but that your own exhaustion gives that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But to go ahead.
you're kind of leading into what we're going to talk about, the tips for your clients. What are your top 3 tips for your clients? I guess that might be one of them, but do you have others that you would also share?
I think first we didn't talk a lot about the thinking mind, but I think there's really something to when we are going through that spiritual process to ask for, what's for my greater good, or, please help me grow, please help me evolve, as opposed to, and I think this comes from that early childhood or trauma response of being overly responsible. Instead of the thinking mind saying, okay, creator, or okay, source, please help me, serve the world in this way, or please help me know how to talk to this person so that we have understanding and everything's okay between us, because that may not be what's for our greater good. So really just keeping it more open to the experience that is going to create the most growth. I say whisper or whack. So to me, that would allow the whispers to come and for us to be guided gently instead of these major life upheavals that, make us surrender anyway.
Yes. Yes.
So that, and then second, I think we've said it many ways, but it's that constant alignment to in whatever is your way. So if you only have 2 minutes, right? Because so many people, it's well, when I can, get some time off or clear my schedule or have no kids around. It's okay, then how about while you're washing your face, or when you're in the shower, or those few moments you're in the bathroom by yourself, to keep aligning. So whether that's just like beauty, like the hummingbird in the window, or it's the memory of, sitting up on that perch after that great hike, keep aligning to something that lifts our energy. And then whether it's, getting hugged from an angel or a connection to the divine in whatever way that people have access to. I used to think that if once I learned how to, every day, every moment be in that energy, then I would have arrived. And now to me, it's more, no, I want to engage life. Like I feel like I'm learning and growing. And if somehow I get there, then doesn't that mean I'm done here? So to just keep aligning in all the small ways. And that's how we get there. It's so easy to be impatient, and I've done intensives or 2-year programs or a week at a time, and thinking, okay, when I come out of this, it's going to be it. But no, it's those are amazing and they clear bigger stuff. But then it's the every day, every moment we can. And I think that brings me to, I say 15 seconds at a time, right? So every time I'm at a red light, is there a shake off, or is there a squeeze release, or is there a silent growl? Like just to keep attending to the nervous system to make sure that I'm in the body. Because when I do those things, it might be like, oh, well, I'm feeling pretty joyful. Or it could also be like, oh, I wasn't even breathing deep. So keeping that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to get disconnected or distracted or pulled out. And so just keep coming back home. Beautiful.
Over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that actually leads to something you mentioned last time we spoke, was energy clearing and cleansing as a regular, not even day to day, but like you say, every 15 seconds or every minute or every hour, just to.
Once an hour for 15 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. So shaking, growling, any other suggestions for that?
Any kind of release, right? So we're so good at, I'm going to take that nice calming breath. I think a lot of times we get attached to, or we think that if we're chilling throughout the day, that that's going to be good for us. But what I find is that what's more important is that we let go of shit all day long. That we, we tense up, or we brace, or we get that adrenaline rush. It's like, well, where's all that energy going? And so more to do the release. So, wood chopper, or to take a pillow and twist it, or to throw it down, or just, anything. You don't have to be mad. It's just moving energy, but it shakes things up and shakes things out. And that I find where more information from down below will just perk up, of some insight or some awareness or some guidance of what or where or how I want to do something.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it makes me think of the dogs, right? After you come home and they've been a little stressed while you were gone, and now they shake it off.
Yeah.
And we don't do that. We just keep putting more in and pressing down and having those moments, even just a walk, right? Just a moment to say, okay, I'm releasing now, and to consciously let that flow through you. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love, love, love the way you combine psychology and spirituality. Obviously, this is my jam. I could talk about this all day. So I love your energy. I want to work with you. So how can people find you? What do you offer?
Well, I have a website, hearthealing.org, that has most of my offerings, but I also have a YouTube at Deanne, Deanned, where it's just an opportunity to get to know me and what I offer. And there's quick, easy courses, or there's, some longer videos, or I'll do just short-term coaching, or the full-on EMDR intensives, or the spiritual work. So that's all available on the website.
Beautiful, beautiful. We talked about the bonus for the day, that you were going to offer us a quick little meditation to help us experience some of the gifts that you have to offer. I will let the audience know that after this meditation, we're just going to end the video so that you can remain in that energy. So if you want to work with Deanne, make sure you check out the links below, check out her website, go subscribe to her channel, and say hello however you'd like to, either to her or to I. We're always here to support you if you need any help healing your trauma so you can step into your purpose and make the world a better place through thriving. So I will hand it over to you and allow you to walk us through what you have planned for us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we all benefit when we do the work, right?
Yeah.
So let's just take a moment and get grounded in your own way. And we're going to do an activity that's somewhat of an energy clearing, and maybe there'll be something extra for you. Just as you breathe, I'd like you to begin imagining a golden ball at the top of your head. And for some of you, this might just be the warmth of the sun. As my Sundance elder used to say, the sun shines equally upon all of us. No matter what choices we've made or the struggles we're having right now, it still shows up for us. For others of you, perhaps there's love and light from the universe that feeds this gold ball, this golden light that you can now begin to let drift down in through the top of your head. Just like the morning sun coming up gently. You don't have to direct it because it already has its inherent wisdom, its healing presence. It will do the work just by being. Letting it continue to expand down your throat, into your chest. Noticing it shines in all directions, So feeling it in the back of your shoulder blades, up through the back of your neck and back of your head, and also down your back, mid-back, low back. And it may rest in your heart or in your solar plexus. For some of you, you might even experiment dropping it down into your belly, and it may want to rest there, but for most of you, it'll be up in your heart or solar plexus, radiating out in all directions. It's important that we have intention, so just setting the intention that you want to receive this light for your greater good. Perhaps you have a special request for your health and healing, or you put your hand on a particular part of your body, you invite more of it to show up there. Or you get to not be responsible and let it just be, just let it be radiating. And you get to just be absorbing it without effort. So much so that it's going to shine bigger, wider, all around you now, taking up your auric field, radiating out, kind of like when you put a flashlight on your hand as a kid, it shines through your skin, out. No right or wrong, maybe it's 6 inches, maybe it's 6 feet, but fully encapsulating you now. And you get to use the dimmer switch. You might want to adjust the temperature or the brightness in a way that feels right for you right now, which might be different than 10 minutes from now. That you get to have it exactly what feels right for you. And then just surrendering even more to where you're feeling floaty. And you begin to drift up. Because that intention of you getting to evolve or be healed, what's for your greater good, is now going to take you to the healing place. So you begin to drift up and just feeling whether your whole body has come with you, or maybe it just feels like your spirit, no right or wrong, it's whatever it is. And first, just allow your fascination to be looking around as you drift up further and further, seeing your surroundings, beginning to notice some of the atmosphere. Up through the clouds, or maybe for a moment while you're in the clouds, it's kind of like when the snow is heavy and it's quiet. You get to experience that quieter feel. Maybe even putting your hands out and bathing in, scooping up the cloud and putting it in your face or brushing it on you just to feel its fluffy softness, silkiness. As you continue to drift up further and further, you might notice your star brothers and sisters and saying hello to them, or maybe even asking them if they have any wisdom or elixir, or just the little bit of a higher vibe for you, just a little homeopathic dose of their vitality and their energy, so as to not fry the human meat suit, but just enough. And as you pass by with the intention now to go to that healing place, floating up even more, what's for your highest good. And for some people, you already know this place and you'll just land. For others, you might feel like you go up to floor 4, up through some thresholds, or just in the clouds. It's with the intention of going to that healing place, that other realm. And as you sense your landing, your arrival through that threshold into that healing place, staying in your golden bubble, your golden light for right now. First, just noticing that you have arrived. You might notice thinking mind might have some expectation, or emotions might be excited, or just want to let it all out. So just curiously witness whatever it is. You don't have to direct anything. Just holding space for that your intention is to have an experience that's for your greater good. And now, like an elevator, the door will open, so the gold light will part so that you can step out into the healing space, taking those first couple steps, just taking in your environment. Perhaps noticing how much more crisp and clean the air feels, how much more vibrant the colors are. And how crisp and clear the sounds are. Just gently taking a couple more steps. Noticing that there's nature around you, but it's with such vitality, so much more. And like walking into a room with your favorite people, you bathe in that energy. You are open to receiving it. And hearing your intention to be here for this healing place, it has activated a being who is coming toward you that you just see as an orb or a ball of light so far from the distance. And you notice your attention turn toward it. And as it comes closer, you start to notice a form, perhaps like a gingerbread shape, or a spirit being. Or you may be somebody who sees more form, or you might just know it's there. Any way is okay. As it comes closer, notice your intention. I am here to grow. And maybe there's even some surrender or forgiveness asked, like, I don't really know what I need today. My intention is to just do right by myself, just to keep clearing or growing or to learn something. I'm just here. I surrender. And more often, it's going to just be in your experience. So in these next couple moments of quiet, just noticing, it might be that your attention is drawn to a flower or something that flew by, or all of a sudden you're a dancing bear, or you're part of the creek. Just allow whatever you feel drawn to and have as much compassion as you can to your thinking mind, which now that I listed off those possibilities might be trying to direct you to it. But just holding space for returning to that intention. I'm here for whatever's for my greater good. I'm just going to be. There'll be time to journal or think about or analyze later. Right now you get to just engage, being. okay not to fully understand. You can come back here as many times as you want or need. What's more important is that you take the one droplet of whatever's happening and fully engage it. Have a direct experience of whatever is happening at this moment, even if that's nothing. Notice nothingness. Notice the one thing that's right there. And notice that thinking mind may have lots of questions. But for now, I'm encouraging you just to sit with whatever you have just engaged or experienced or received, whatever experience of yourself. And just intend to sit with that experience, that little homeopathic dose. It's going to be time to return to the gold light in a moment, so giving thanks, acknowledging the one who has been here with you, or anyone. Gently making your way back toward the gold light. Stepping into it. As the door shuts, you get to have a moment to just be before it moves. It's just helping you recalibrate to now being in the gold light. Ego mind loves to have something tangible to know we got some answer, we got some adjustment, or we got something to do. And yet, it's in just being that we get the deepest wisdoms, deepest healing. So in your own way, just being with the intention now of coming back down through the threshold, through the layers, at your own pace. Feeling that gold light coming down closer to where you see the location of where you are, perhaps the building that you're in, making your way down through, and then landing back in the space that you started, perhaps a chair, feeling that arrival, again, just taking a moment to be. And just letting yourself sit with. And if or when thinking mind says, oh, I have things to do, it's time to go, just laugh at it for a moment. Oh, that thinking mind's always looking out for you to make sure you're on task. And then just returning to being for the next 3 breaths in your own time. Blessings to you, to everyone.